So hi everyone, my name is Stephanie Curcio. I went to DePaul University and was an economics undergraduate major. I graduated in 2016 and then actually moved on. I did the 4+1 program and also did a master's in sustainable management, which took a year after that. So graduated in 2017 from that. So been in the workforce ever since, had couple of different opportunities and kind of we can talk about them during this interview as they might come up, but currently I am actually a manager at KPMG in the infrastructure advisory group.
So I'm wondering, how did your major in economics help you prepare for your current position?
Yeah, definitely. I feel like economics is something that I wanted to do probably since high school. It was something that I felt like pretty sure about. Kind of entering into college, I felt it was like a really versatile major and that you could, really apply it to a lot of different areas. So even if you felt, that you weren't necessarily sure of what industry or field that you're interested in down the line, I think economics just offers such a great versatility of skill sets. I think namely like the analytical skills that come from the economics major, as well as like problem solving skills, I think are really fundamental. And I think that it's something that's very unique to the economics, discipline in general, is the ability and like focus on complex problem solving
Yeah.
skills. And so I found that that has been incredibly helpful in my career, even though I no longer work, specifically as an economic analyst, work more in a role of consulting now. I find that, it still absolutely applies in my everyday position.
Jumping off of that question, or your answer for that question, when you were a younger student, were you perhaps interested in something different than what you are now? Did you kind of just jump around in the different like concentrations of economics?
Yeah, definitely. So I think, economics kind of served as like the foundation for me. And I always kind of kept that as like my guiding, like compass really. And then I definitely switched around over time, uh, from freshman year to senior year, and then ultimately going on to the 4+1. There were a
Mhm.
lot of different interests. I think like Dr. Owen would probably like say that I switched my minor probably like 4 or 5 times because that was like the one thing that I was like, okay, I can kind of play around with this and see what I like. I can use my free electives to, experiment in different areas. So, things such as like communication, geography, I did like, like geographic information systems. And so, they're definitely different, but, I think you start to understand like yourself a little bit better as you move through the college years or your college journey. And ultimately, those additional electives are really there to serve like that particular like, opportunity to discover new things, which is kind of the approach that I took it as. But I ultimately feel that like maintaining that economics as the foundation was
Yeah.
really critical for me. It felt like, you're kind of, it's really hard to argue against, having an economics major, as your foundation.
And then did you have an internship while at DePaul that is relevant to your current work and role?
Yeah, I did. And that kind of goes back to, I know you had just mentioned, how do you progress in like your field or your like career interests? So I had a couple of internships at DePaul. One of them was in like supply chain management. One of them was in sort of like insurance products. And so, they're definitely different skill sets, but I think it was that focus on like the problem solving abilities again that was like really critical there.
Mhm.
Um, and then I think like interestingly about the way that I like progressed from like my final internship into like the full-time workforce was actually like the industry. So I worked for a utility company in Chicago within their supply chain field, and then found a job opportunity for an economic analyst in an engineering firm. And so that that kind of industry really like kind of pulled me in from that internship. So it wasn't even necessarily the same like department or practice. So I kind of moved from like supply chain, in utilities to economic analysis at an engineering firm. But the overlap there was really in like the infrastructure industry. So in building, transportation assets, right, and building, new energy networks. That was really the connection, was the industry. And then everything that kind of fell into place after that was not the same, between internships and the full-time job, but actually the industry and the subject was really the connection.
Okay. Yeah, my next question was going to be, did you always know that you wanted to be in this occupation? And it sounds like maybe you didn't, and it was just kind of just happened.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. It really did just happen. I feel like I had an interest in things like urban, planning, city planning, those types of things, sustainability, of course. I moved on to do like the master's program, focusing in that area. And so there were like a few things that I kind of recognized as my interests over time, but I didn't really think of them as like the infrastructure industry, like per se, until I was really like opened up to my first full-time role with the engineering firm. And I actually feel like in general, the industry is almost underplayed. I think when you're an undergraduate, like there's a lot of focus on this topic, right, or the subject at hand. But I actually think that like the focus on the industry is really important as well. And I found that being able to maintain like a line of connection within the infrastructure industry over the last 5 years that I've been working full time now,
Mhm.
that has been like the most beneficial thing for me, is having experience in other firms,
Yeah.
other internships, to say like I know about it. I can see it from the client side, like I can see it from an engineering perspective, from a utility company's perspective.
Did you have a faculty mentor while at DePaul? And if so, who was it and how were they helpful?
Yeah, so I felt like all the professors were really great, especially in the economics department. And it's really exciting to be able to, connect with them postgraduate. I would say that Dr. Owen was still kind of like my focus, like mentor. She was the key mentor for me during my time as undergrad. Being the director of the program, of course, you naturally like are able to spend more time with Dr. Owen, or at
Mhm.
least I was. And so, and I kind of gravitated toward working with her a little bit more. What I really am grateful for with Dr. Owen, I think, is that she kind of was always focusing on like the next step, like the next internship or the next
Mhm.
opportunity, and trying to really encourage me to like connect to those areas. So I really appreciate that. And then also, I think her ability to like recognize the interests that I had, even if they were, like I was saying, kind of like using my free electives to like discover new interests or topics. I'll give you the example. Um, I took like one or two geographic information systems courses, so the GIS
Yeah.
classes. And I think Dr. Owen like helped me recognize that that was something that was really interesting to me. I really excelled in those two courses. And then ultimately, I ended up doing the 6 classic certification at DePaul, and got like the GIS certification with
Nice.
my undergrad. And it was just kind of like a random interest. And then what I find like so fascinating today is that working in the infrastructure industry, it's very much location based, and like
Yeah.
spatial analytics are very important. Like you're looking at like transportation assets, you're looking at where like roads and bridges are being planned, right? And so it's actually something that has followed me like throughout my career, and it has been actually like a competitive, um, it's something that's created something like a unique skill set for me, or allowed me to be more competitive than my peers in certain areas, because it's such a kind of like niche topic.
Yeah.
And but it's very applicable, and it helps me also relate to like our clients more. So Yeah. So
Yeah.
I honestly, I would have to say, like, yeah, I would say like, um, I'm grateful to Dr. Owen for being able to like recognize those
Yeah.
interests. Yeah.
I've heard GIS tossed around in a few other like networking sessions I've had. Could you elaborate like in one or two sentences what that is? Because I still don't know.
Yeah, definitely. So it's essentially a mapping software. So like pretty much anytime you like open your phone, right, and you look at like Google Maps or something or whatever it is,
Right.
like Google Maps is the best example. That's all developed by GIS. So it's literally just taking location analytics, like the latitude and the longitude of everything, right, like,
Yeah.
that can be located, and bringing them into the software that's then like presented, as like a map. And so you can analyze things such as like, where's the greatest population density and what, opportunities could you have to like expand real estate in a certain area based on that local population, or where, might it be best to, expand a new highway corridor or highway extension, right? And so those are kind of the areas that I've found to be like really key, especially like in the work that I do. But yeah,
Interesting.
it's maps. So it's
Yeah.
it's really fun once you learn it. It's not very intuitive to learn
Right.
GIS in my opinion, but once you understand it, it's actually very fun.
Um, and then wondering about what the application or recruitment process is like at your current firm. And then is there a particular section of your undergraduate experience that they focused on, whether that be, extracurriculars, academics, or work experience?
Yeah. So my current role is not the one that I had out of college or the firm that I'm at. So again, I think like the utility company was the last internship I had out of college, and it was a full-time internship actually while I was doing my senior year and then into master's. So then when I applied for the engineering firm for their economics position, that was my first full-time job application really, or and job that I had. And they were really focused on the connection between the industries. And so having like that understanding of the utility industry. But then also because of the fact that the role was for an economic analyst, that I didn't have that experience with my internship specifically. So I
Mm.
really relied on the courses that I took to kind of supplement that. And so
Yeah.
highlighting the more analytical courses, right, that you take, like econometrics, focusing on things such as like energy economics was one of the electives that I took. So highlighting those types of experience was important. But then I will say, like, moving from the engineering firm to my role in consulting now with KPMG, the key focus was actually that the engineering firm really served as like a competitor to the firm that I'm working at today. And
Mm.
so their primary interest was, understanding the work that I did with the old firm, right, with the engineering firm,
Yeah.
and being able to like apply those same experiences from a different perspective.
Got it. Very cool. Um, on that topic, so as an upperclassman, I'm starting to think about, getting a full-time position, and all the anxiety that comes along with that. So just curious about like when you received the offer for the full-time position, was that such a huge relief for you?
Yeah, it really was. I actually remember like getting the phone call and saying like
Called
that
you.
yeah, that that you like have the offer. It's such a great feeling, to put in the work and to see
Yeah.
those accomplishments take form. It definitely like takes a load off, but then you quickly jump into the role and you're like, oh no, like what am I doing now? This is insane. But yeah, it was definitely a great moment.
Do you have any advice in regard to building connections within this industry?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. And I feel like, especially now, at least within my firm, and I think a lot of companies that are probably similar. A lot of us are working remote still, after like 18 months,
Yeah.
since the pandemic really started. And so the connections has been really important. And I think, there are a couple different like avenues that you can take to building connections, I think, as an industry as a whole, and then also like within your teams.
Mm.
So I think when you think about like the broader industry, I think like professional organizations are really important. So, there are organizations that are specific to your industry or specific to your interest,
Mhm.
that it can be really beneficial. A lot of times, very like-minded people are joining those types of organizations, and so it's very likely that you'll meet people that you could certainly run into in a professional environment. And then also like maintaining connection with your past employers, past colleagues, your classmates and your peers. Right now, I think a lot of your peers will enter into similar fields of study, right? It just makes sense. And you'll often actually cross paths, I think, after undergraduate. So I would just recommend, being able to like reach out, even if it's just for a quick chat or just, celebrating others' accomplishments, something as small as like seeing someone on LinkedIn, right? Or resharing a post. I think those things are really important. And especially now, in the virtual environment still, it's really important to create and like maintain a personal brand. Um, and and also, when you have all these connections from different places, you can serve as, kind of a connector to others, right? You can connect a leader from, a past employer or someone that you knew from undergraduate school. And, you become known as someone who can make those connections and who can bring people to the table.
Yeah.
And that's really important.
Okay. So is there anything about your field that you wish you knew more about? Seems like you're
Um,
pretty well versed, but
no, there's always so much more to learn. I, I would say, like, specifically with the infrastructure field, um, you know, there's a lot of news going around about the infrastructure bill right now. It's a really hot topic. It's very important to our industry. All of my clients are government agencies, so they're state, local, federal agencies. So it's especially critical to them. So I actually feel that um, that there's always something new to be learned about the infrastructure bill. It's, of course, it's still changing as of, September 2021, but I think I would actually like to understand like the fiscal policy behind it a little bit better. So, understanding like the funding mechanisms,
okay.
how they're allocating, government spending, and also like the taxation around it. I think
Yeah.
I didn't have like as much of a focus on taxes. I know there's a lot of like courses actually in the economics department, but it was never really something that I was very focused on. And I think it's
Mhm.
very applicable.
I think the outlook of this industry looks like.
Yeah, I think, when you think about economics as a whole practice, right, where it spans across different disciplines, um, I think in this pandemic, post-pandemic world, is honestly, I see it as one of the more interesting times to be involved in the economic space.
Yeah.
I think like economics really thrives kind of during times of uncertainty,
Mhm.
which is what we're continuing to see, because it's really just kind of a science of, complex behaviors, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, I honestly think this is probably one of the best times to get into the field.
And then what kind of skills do you recommend students start developing, technical or otherwise?
Yeah, so technical or otherwise. So um, I think that honestly, soft skills are still a little bit underrated in the professional field. I know we talk about them a lot, and when you have like business development classes,
Mhm.
it's definitely a big topic. But I think that the execution is actually really difficult, especially in this virtual environment where you're trying to like communicate with someone on a screen and it just doesn't, really
Yeah.
come across in the same way. So I think having I think being authentic, having good communication skills, and then being able to like work well with others is really important. So I
Mm.
think that ultimately comes down to being self-aware.
Yeah.
Especially I think a lot of people, live alone or they just live with like one person,
Mhm.
and you're not getting as much human interaction, right, as you
Yeah.
used to. I think students actually are getting more interaction, like, the our like postgraduate counterparts, right? Because a lot of
Yeah.
us are actually sitting at home. And so I
Interesting. Yeah.
think, yeah. So I think having self-awareness is really important because what I found is that like the individuals who can climb the ladder like the most quickly and who are most successful are the ones that um, are really like authentic and human,
Mm.
and who are respectful and motivating of their teams. And so, I think that comes down to being able to connect to people on a personal level and being able to really, encourage and motivate your teams. I think
Yeah.
it makes people more effective.
Yeah, absolutely. How has being virtual and remote affected your job and your, I guess, your enjoyment of your job?
Yeah, I think there are like good days and bad days about it. I think like now we've very much adapted to that environment. I can't say like, in the first 6 months it was the same. I think it was very challenging to be able to maintain a deep connection with our clients, especially I think for my role and a lot of the folks that I work with in my practice, we traveled a lot to the client site. And so we saw,
Mm,
a
yeah.
lot of our clients in person very often. And that kind of just halted. And so I think at first it was very challenging to maintain those connections, but then, you start to realize that everyone, is definitely in the same boat. And our clients started coming to us with like different needs. And I thought that was really interesting because we were able to, then kind of pick up and still support our clients based on like these previous connections that we had and just support them in different ways. I think like personally working from home, it allows a lot of flexibility, which is really nice. But I certainly do miss more like face-to-face interaction, which, we're getting there. There's more opportunity to do that. There's, limited capacity office spaces and things
Hmm.
like that now. So it's definitely better than it
Yeah.
was. Yeah.
Is KPMG, they're like saying it's flexible, so like you can come into the office maybe 2 days a week?
Yeah, exactly. So it's, I think it's 50% capacity. We're in the Aon Center. And so I think we have a couple of floors, and everyone kind of just has like a blocked off office space or, open
Yeah.
table, and you just, maintain your distance.
Mhm.
And you just have to, like record when you're planning on like going in for that day. So you can't really just show up. You have to kind of like give
Gotcha.
people an advance notice. But yeah, so it's about like 50% capacity right now. So I've stopped into the office a few times, and it's kind of funny because I like, as much as I want to be in person, you're still kind of missing people, right?
Yeah,
Like maybe your
not the
days
same.
don't coordinate the same way.
Mhm.
Um, and also, just getting used to the flexibility of working from home.
Yeah,
Being away from home is something you have to like now readapt to. So
yeah,
it'll be interesting to see like how this
absolutely.
continues to go.
My last question for you, Stephanie, do you have any advice for current students who might be interested in pursuing a similar career path?
Yeah, I think that, I think, management consulting and I think the economics practice is a very solid foundation. I truly cannot recommend it enough.
Mm.
I think it's a great way to start your career. It's very versatile and adaptable. I'd say, honestly, regardless of like what industry you're in, I found like the best piece of advice is just being able to, and not even like just work hard, but being able to kind of like hit above your weight, I think is the best advice that I have. And so even if you're in an internship now, or you're in a entry level associate position,
Yeah.
um, having the mindset of performing like above that position, maybe at the level higher, is I think really helpful because it puts you in a position where you're competitive among your peers,
Mm,
and it also like it allows you to kind of like reflect this like level of maturity, that I think is actually really important. And so if you're in that position, I would say, kind of put yourself in the mindset of being the position higher. And I think people really recognize that level of maturity, um, and that level of, responsibility that you're interested in. So I think that's my biggest piece of advice.
okay. Wow, that's great. Thank you for the advice, and thank you so much for interviewing with me.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me, Hannah.